we want to open this up to the audience here, but let me just say this. This is why we're here. Because when you turn on CNN and MSNBC and you listen to the talking heads talk about gun violence, you're going to hear them talk about assault weapons. You're going to hear them talk about high-capacity magazine clips. You're going to hear them talk about background checks, and those are all things that are critically important to this debate. But we need to start talking about programming and after-school activities and mental health resources and the school-to-prison pipeline and all of the things that lead some young man to give up hope and turn a gun on one of his neighbors, right? Because that's what allows you to do that, is that there's just no hope for you. And so there's nothing there on the other side. So you pull the trigger. And that's got to be part of this conversation about gun violence as well, is not just the stuff that has gun in the title, right? But the pieces of gun violence prevention in urban areas that are linked to giving hope back to kids that have no hope and retreat to violence as their first defense. So this is why we're here. This is why we're here within 7 days of this new session convening, because we want to make sure that everything that's being said here is part of that discussion. Just listen, I'm a big believer, as I think everybody is here, on assault weapons and high-capacity magazine clips and background checks, but this is the full conversation.
Thank you all. This is probably one of the most persuasive and intelligent discussions that I've heard about gun violence in recent weeks, maybe recent years. So I really want to thank you, and I look forward to continuing this conversation here and elsewhere around the state. I just want to emphasize something there is no single solution. There's no panacea or a cure-all. If there were, we'd go to work on it in Washington. But it is multifaceted. The response has got to be multi-pronged. We've got to keep at it. And I would just finish these remarks on this note. A lot of our obstacle here is misunderstanding. What Representative McCrory just said about owning guns, what you said, Captain Hort. Responsible gun owners should be on our side. We're not here to reduce the protections of the Second Amendment or disrespect it. We're here to enlist people who have guns and who care about the safety of their children. And, we need to broaden our cause as much as possible, because the broader we are, the more powerful we'll be, including mental health, which, as you point out so well, has been ignored or disregarded so often. And just recently has now been put on a parity in the law with physical health treatment, and yet still, in practice, fails to be accorded that kind of status. So the broader, more all-encompassing the solutions, the broader, more all-encompassing the coalition, the more effective we'll be. And I couldn't agree more with a number of the comments that have been made. I began with it. Enforcement is key. We can have the best law, we can have the best new laws, but if they're not enforced, they're dead letter. And that's why what the law enforcers and all of us do to make sure these law enforcement is so very, very important. So should we open it now to?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Henry Brown. Read personnel. Listen, I'm not here to be friends with nobody, because you know why? Because I heard Senator Bronkenthal said 20 families grieving. Well, in the past 11 years, I have seen 330 people grieve. I heard somebody say funerals. I have been to 330 funerals. So I'm not here today just because we are feeling sorry for ourselves. What happened down in Newtown, oh man, we grieve just as much as anybody in Newtown grieve because we understand the significant loss of lives. So I hear these things that Cynthia said, and I agree with her 100%. I heard what Doug said, and I agree with him 100%. But I also heard what this lady said too, and I agree with her. How can we, listen, we did 3 marches to the state capitol talking about gun violence. I didn't see none of you folks. None of you. None of you. Because Sandy Hook didn't happen. But 330 black lives that was lost. Black families and Hispanic families was grieving, and then we don't show no remorse. So I'm not here today because you're hurting today. But what will happen tomorrow? Are you still going to feel the same way? Because this is going to pass just like you said. Then Hartford going to be still facing the same problem that Hartford been facing for the last 20 years. The last 20 years. I'm outraged. I was outraged when I heard about those babies. Innocent babies. If somebody had came to one of those rallies at the state capitol when we were talking about mental health issues, the same thing that everybody's talking about now, we've been talking about. We already proclaimed those things because we knew, but it fell on deaf ears. So don't come down here today telling me nothing to make me feel good if you're not going to do something to change it. Because I'm tired of people dying. I'm tired of funerals. I see this all the time. First responders. My heart goes out to you first responders. We pray for you every day. But that's a first responder. I'm a first responder. This mother's a first responder. We need help. We need help. I thank Chief Rebella. God bless him. Great man. He's making a difference. But we need more Chief Rebellas. We need for our representatives to stand up and take our places. I don't want nobody trying to make me feel good today. Do something. Stop talking. Because all we're doing is talking. Nothing's going to change with talk. You got to implement action to bring about changes. Changes. Guns are killing people every day. Every day. God knows if Newtown didn't happen, well, none of you be here today. None of you. I can talk about past history because we don't walk to the state capitol 3 times with marches. I ain't seen not one elected official, not even our mayor. So don't come here today and tell me what we're going to do to change gun violence if we're not going to work together as one community. Because you can't separate communities. Newtown, Harvard, we're all the same. We're all bleed, we all die. And you can't separate that. You cannot separate that. And that's what's wrong with us. We got to change the laws. How you going to change the law? You can't stop people from buying guns. Stop promoting violence. You got to stop promoting violence. We promote violence every day. Violent video games. We talk about them. Am I right, Mr. Beckman? Movies. Send your child in front of the TV all day. Let a child watch all this stuff that's not right for their mind. Music. And we talking about the guns. It's what we promote. It's what our children see every day. What they read, what they listen to. And God knows in some places what they see every day from some of us. We're going to talk about feeling sorry. I grieve every day for my baby. Like, I don't agree. I have listen, I have that young guy, that young girl's obituary that remind me every day that how important life is. Life. I don't look at a white child. I don't look at a black child. I look at a human being as being a human being. First of all, if we're going to do anything to come on gun violence, we got to look at who we are. First of all, I'm just a preacher that cares about people. We don't care where you come from. But I've been assigned to do this thing in this Harvard, Connecticut, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. This is no time for people to be talking. If you're going to change it, you got to be real. You ain't going to be real? Don't tell me no lies. Because I heard lies and I don't see people don't care. Because you show me you care. I was sitting here today telling you the truth. That yeah, you care. But all I hear is talk today. Show me some truth. I want no truth. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leroy Gardner. I echo his sentiments. I'm afraid when I see panels, the whole concept of panels frighten me because it's a springboard for rhetoric. And once we get involved with rhetoric, the action doesn't occur. So every time I hear about a panel being held, and I respect this distinguished people giving up their times, their accomplished, learned people, and Senator Blumenthal particularly in heading this, because he's been involved at the state level here, and he's a hands-on guy. He's similar to like Michael Lawler was. He gets it, so he understands. So it was a mixed blessing when he became a senator. He was in a more effective role in terms of what he could and couldn't do power-wise, but there's a disconnect that became by him going to that level. He's not as hands-on and can't get in and involved with policies and agencies in the way that he could to make things get straightened out in this state. And let me say what I also know about my background in terms of panels and committees. I'm a career criminal who, because of my misdiagnosed mental health illnesses, the remedy for my illness was incarceration. And so a light bulb went off in somebody's eyes, or competent lawyer said, well, he's an intelligent, articulate individual. Maybe there's some other issues going on. So I was finally diagnosed with bipolar disorder and with mood destabilizers and so forth. I got away from the criminal aspects of acting out, self-destructive use of drugs and things that just added to the cocktail. And in getting my head together, I saw all of these ills of society and how policies were formulated and not helping people. And I took what I learned from going through the system and said, I'm going to share this knowledge. And I took training as a legislative advocate through NAMI. I got certified, and I said, I'm going to be an instrument of change, because I have a unique perspective of having been a victim of a broken system, and having ideals and access to feedback from clients who are in these different capacities. But all of this is really done for me in this year of going to legislative public hearings and things of that nature. I've labeled myself, because I am that outspoken, opinionated person, I have that insight. I've spotlighted inadequacies at different agencies and so forth, and it all has gotten me as retaliation and targeted me, and it's gotten me to the point where agencies don't even want me as a client. I'm in the northeast, southeast section of Connecticut. I'm a client at Southeast Mental Health Authority, and I've made complaints about how they function and things of that nature. And all it's done is just limited me in getting services that I need. And my friends and my contemporaries who are clients at these agencies and so forth, who admire me because of my ability to get up in front of people, I'm not shy, I'm not withdrawn, and talk about things. They don't have the wherewithal. They have developmental disabilities where they can't speak, they can't write. But I'm a professional writer. I've been published. I worked as a freelance journalist for an online newspaper. I've had my op-ed pieces published in the local newspaper. I've been blessed. And to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think the call God has in my life is to bring attention to those who are sick and suffering. I'm living in an abandoned house right now. I can't get into treatment. I can't get into services. I live in Norwich. I don't know how I got up here, but God said, you got to get up here. You got an audience. Use this gift. Let people know. But the mistake I made a couple of weeks ago was sharing my frustrations about trying to get help and services with a friend of mine who didn't have the stability or the wherewithal that I had to try to maybe harness a lot of that frustration. Keep knocking on doors where you can't get help. Instead, he went and got a gun, barricaded himself in his house, called the police. When the cops came, he shot a cop 4 times, then he killed himself. My friend Jason, this happened in Norwich, Connecticut a week ago. You might have saw it on the news. And he did it because he watched how I couldn't get help when I went to people and said, I was in a car accident. I just had a personal crisis. I was in a car accident, head on. I had a concussion. I broke my heart, a bunch of stuff. I lost use of my body. The next week, my landlord said, well, where's that rent money you had? I lost the money because I was in a head injury. I didn't know where I put the money. He was supposed to come meet me. I had everything set up. I told the doctor, let me know. They threw me out of the house, threw me on the street. I was in crises, wandering around without my medications, a whole bunch of stuff, not knowing what to do. My first ideal of medication and self-medicating, for what I know, is crack cocaine. I'm not being seen by my providers or my clinicians because they haven't been in touch with me because of the car injury and all the issues with me trying to track my landlord down. So I said, don't hurt yourself, Leroy. Don't use incarceration as the solution or the method of institutionalization when you really just need some counseling. I went to these providers to try to get this out, Southeastern Mental Health Authority, who I've complained to Senator Blumenthal about before, and he's assisted me to the extent he could by looking into it. He's limited in what he can and can't do at this senatorial level. But he did speak, and it was hard for him because he was bound by his functions of his job, but he's concerned about who I am, because I've known this man for almost 6 or 7 years, and when I've had issues, he's gotten involved. But at any rate, I told this to Jason. I said, they wouldn't do anything when they wouldn't give me a bed, because they knew the leeway guard, we don't want him. We put him into the brief care unit, or we put him in one of our emergency recourse respite houses. If he sees some type of impropriety, he's going to write this person, write that person. So they don't allow me those opportunities or those services, access to this. And the police, oh God, and you know how the police do people like us, Leroy. And Jason knew this. So he had the ultimate remedy to get behind all of this rhetoric, and he said, we're going to change this, we're going to change that, we're going to implement these types of new strategies. He took the easy way out. He said, before I'm going to do if I do the suicide by cop thing, I'm going to send a message. I'm going to take one of them with me. Fortunately for that police officer to respond, he had a bulletproof vest on, so the 4 bullets that he put into him didn't kill him. God, thank God, because I don't want to see a police officer die. Nobody did. And I feel sorry that Jason had to do that to get attention. And then when he couldn't do that to get his frustrations out, he said, I don't have any opportunities left in this world, so I might as well end it now. He's dead. And I wish I could put his body right here to send a message so we could get past rhetoric and see people are dying. All of this rhetoric and not getting action done is costing people's lives. There's a man dead, and possibly a poor, dedicated police officer almost died. We want to put together where the guns, the violence, and the mental health all come together. It came together in that. And if you don't think my situation, what I'm going through and how I can't get help, how I was told this morning when there was a bed was available at a respite house to get me out of this abandoned house I'm living in, and I was told specifically, we're not going to let you in, Mr. Gardner, because you tried to sue us one time. And they told me that this morning. And I said, God only want one thing out of me, to get this message out. And I didn't even have a ride up here, praise God. I saw a Christian brother in the Norwich area, this gentleman, he just happened to be coming in, and I said, this is my calling, and Lord, you putting this in my path today, and these people are going to hear about this.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me just say something quick to sort of respond to, listen, I get the skepticism about panels, right? I get the skepticism about talk, but we're going to get something changed because we're able to bring your stories and what you're telling us here to Washington to change people's minds, right? I mean, our job is to talk. Our job is to go down to Washington and convince people that they should pass laws that help the situation back here, whether it's funding services in Hartford or changing gun laws. And so I totally understand that you see a panel up here and you say, I've seen enough of these, right? I need something to change. Well, something has changed already. There's a unique moment here where we can get some attention on gun violence, and we need to do this to be able to hear the stories of community leaders and to hear your stories so that we can bring those back and change minds. And so I get it. I get that you've seen a lot of these, but there's an opportunity here that we haven't had before, and we just want to make sure that we're getting an accurate picture of what we need to be fighting for down there.
Okay, Senator Blumenthal and Murphy, thanks for coming through. My name is Andrew Woods. I'm the Executive Director of Hartford Communities That Care, but also I coordinate what's called the Hartford Crisis Response Team. And in that capacity, I'm contracted by the City of Hartford to make sure that when there's a homicide or a shooting in Hartford, that we have mental health providers available to make sure that families on the spot get the resources they need in terms of grief and mental health counseling and access to those services. One of the things of that, as Ms. Jennings pointed out, is that certainly since 1998, we've had over 720 homicides committed in the city of Hartford, of which, as she pointed out, over 200 are in the unsolved cold case files. That's an average, for some of you who don't know, an average of 1 homicide per week. Brother Kyle and myself are primarily the main 2 people that are contracted with the city of Hartford to provide that service. That doesn't talk about the domestic violence cases. That doesn't talk about dealing with the school system, which calls us as well here in the city of Hartford. That's also, by the way, you should note, a $20,000 a year contract. So when we talk about resources, we talk about the need to, say, enhance and make sure that we have the capacity to enhance and also sustain these services. Let's also take a look about what the real commitment is that our city has, our state has, and our federal folks have around making sure these services continue to be provided. But again, just as the police and law enforcement need dollars to enhance and sustain their efforts, so do folks like us inside this community. Senator, with all due respect, you mentioned you have a cross-section of folks on the table from the mental health establishment. That's not necessarily the case. And when we talk about this dialogue, not only citywide, statewide, and nationally, we really need to take a look at folks who are doing this work and really make sure that there's a cross-section of folks who do this work and who have a voice at the table in terms of addressing these issues. We work very, very closely with St. Francis Hospital. We have an MOU with St. Francis Hospital. They're the ones who call both myself and Brother Kyle directly for the last 5 years. We're deputized to go directly on the ward and interface with the trauma doctors, with the nurses, and with those families to make sure that communication is kept intact, to where families get the kind of needs and services that they have, or get their needs and services met. But also, when we talk about this whole issue of this mental health debate, it's been touched on that, our kids inside our communities have been traumatized to, you can't even explain the kind of trauma that they go through on a daily basis and continue to go through when it comes down to being impacted by violence. We have yet to even deal with that. With our communities, in suburban communities, we actually look for a clinical explanation on why the crime took place. In urban communities, among people of color, we look for a criminal explanation. And that dialogue has to change. We have to stop clinicalizing when white kids shoot folks and then criminalizing it when black kids shoot folks. When you have the same underlining mental health issues, trauma issues that these kids face no matter who they are. And lastly, a couple weeks ago, Congressman Larson had a forum in West Hartford dealing with the same issue, and both myself and a few others attended. And one of the things that Congressman has been pushing for the last several years has been what's called the Youth Promise Act, which is something that Representative Bobby Scott out of Virginia has been pushing for quite some time. We believe that that is a very, very good piece of legislation that has a lot of resources in it that can get to the communities in a real comprehensive way to address a lot of these issues. And so when we're talking about federal advocacy around certain legislation, around certain bills, that is certainly one that we've looked at. In fact, Steve Harris, I think, is still here. Steve was a part of that and helped put some input in that several years ago when Bobby Scott and them came up. And so this had a lot to do with a lot of folks that actually contributed to the development of that legislation. That's something that we really need to see that as it's stalled right now in Congress, needs to be put back out there, because that was what we believe can generate a lot of resources for what we have. But we stand ready, always have, to work with you guys, roll our sleeves up, and do what we need to do to make sure our families and our communities get the kind of support that they need. And so, as Reverend Brown pointed out, when you're ready, we're ready. We've always been ready. But let that door not shut. Let that line of communication continue to be open. And I believe we can get some significant things done. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Senator Murphy and Senator Blumenthal, for attending here. My name is Ms. Henrietta Beckman. I'm the director of Mothers United Against Violence. And unfortunately, I lost a son due to gun violence in 2002. And the issues that we're raising here today are issues that we had back in 2002. But I'd just like to say that I'm thankful that we're finally going to do something to make a difference in these children's lives, because we are tired of our children dying by guns. And also, I'd just like to say, the people in Sandy Hook, I sympathize with you because of a mom who's lost a child. I know what you went through, and I'd just like to offer my condolences to Sandy Hook and the children and their families. But we need help here in the city of Hartford. And like I said, I'm glad that you opened the doors of the communications, and Mothers United Against Violence would like to be a part of this communication with the mayor and the senators and everybody else here, so don't exclude us. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for coming to the 06120 zip code, poorest zip code in the state of Connecticut, facing some of the most heinous murders over the last 10 years. This past fall, I visited the site of the Mothers United Against Violence vigil, the 19th victim in the city of Hartford, a woman that got bludgeoned to death on Washington Street in the alley. And I spoke at that vigil and I said that I'm tired of this parade of pain. I'm tired of it. I want to get out of this parade. I wish we can stop this parade of pain. A few days later, while working in my church, I get a call that on the 20th of October, my son became the 20th victim in the city of Hartford in his 20th year of life, shot in the back several times by a 20-year-old boy who just was packing his gun in his trunk. I thought I was doing everything right as a pastor, doing everything right by going to the vigils, trying to fight against God, trying to do youth development over the last 30 years. And here I'm facing the death of my son in my arms at Hartford Hospital, and he wouldn't wake up. He wouldn't wake up. I was in pain and suffering because I've been to the other vigils and I tried to talk to the other parents. And I never knew what they were feeling, and it's like, it's an awesome feeling. I hope none of you would never ever get there. Didn't know that I would be on the 20th of October, the head of the parade. I guess asking God that your life is going on, and I'm trying to reconcile the fact that my son is dead, and I'm not going to be able to talk to him, I'm not going to be able to watch him walk down the aisle, and the world is still moving on. When are they going to understand that I lost my son? When are they going to agree with me? God help them understand this pain. Not knowing a few weeks later that God was going to prick the consciousness of every living, caring individual in the state of this country. And now, like me, I could never go home. I have not been home since my son has been dead. I've been to the physical location, but the spiritual side, you can never go home again. I can never go home again. Thanksgiving came, I can never go home again. Christmas, I can never go home again. And now each caring American can never go home again. The same way you did before Sandy Hook. Now you understand the urgency of the matter. We all deserve to die. Those 20 children deserve to die. My son deserved to die. But not after a long life. Not after graduating from college or walking down the aisle, giving your daughter or son away. Not after seeing them turn their tassel to the other side. Not after seeing them work a job and pay taxes to the government and see themselves as a good citizen. And someday in their long life, in their long age of seeing their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren on a rocking chair in their bed, they make peace with their maker. We don't have the right to be having our children shot down like rabid dogs. I'm hoping this is more than a video. I haven't seen this before. So the hope is in me that the most powerful men of our state, the governor and our senators, all the way down to our local, our mayor and our council people are saying to us now, we need to do something so we can go home again. Back to the place where we know that we live in the land of the living. We live in the land of the living. This is our creed as Americans. We live in the land of the living. And we need to bring that peace back to our children. They're all traumatized now. They don't feel that they live in the land of the living. And we need to bring that back to them. We need to bring that back to them. And I'm hoping I'm with you. I don't have any skepticism. I can only afford myself hope because I have other children. I can only afford myself hope, and I will walk wherever you walk. And I'll stand up wherever you stand up. And I'll be wherever you want me to be. Because we live in the land of the living. Thank you.